WNST believes, and gosh, the Raptors are playing basketball this week. We got the Blue Jays taking on the Red Sox, and of course the Orioles in Cincinnati. And a big story out of St. Louis at the end of the week, a little late week news drop over the weekend. It's been a little while since I've had this guy on. It's not because I don't love him or love having him on. I did see him out at the owners' meetings in Phoenix a couple weeks ago. He is a legendary NFL writer, many, many years, and voted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as well as an analyst at Sirius NFL. He is Howard Balzer. H. Balzer 721 is the way to find him out on Twitter, and tens of thousands do. He's still out in St. Louis, and the football team's gone. But Howard, how is life out there, man? I've wondered with the Oakland story and the San Diego story as to when the lawyers are going to be coming in, and I guess it felt like it took a year in St. Louis, but there's some movement out there to try to go get some of the money and bring it back home, right?
Yeah, there really is, and it's funny you said that about wondering when the lawyers would get involved, because I was wondering that too, and I had spoken to different people that were involved in the whole effort, and said, well, is there going to be a lawsuit here? What are you going to do? And I said, well, it's always under consideration. And that. One of the things I think they were waiting for was, the governor to get out of office. I don't know how much that had to do with it, but I think they were also waiting to see about the landscape of things in the NFL, and if there actually was going to be any hope at all of St. Louis, having a team to replace, the Rams. And I think that the feeling was that wasn't going to happen, certainly in the short term. And I think there's this still been, and we talked about it several times over the last, 15, 16 months when it happened, is that there was a lot of bitterness in St. Louis, not only for losing a team, because that's always disappointing, but just the way the whole move went down and the way it was seemingly orchestrated by the league office, and how they ignored the relocation rules, which I know, Nestor, a lot of people say, well, the rules really aren't the rules. The owners can do what they want, which on one level some believe is true, but on another level, those rules were put in when the Raiders won, and a lot of people forget this because it was, more than 30 years ago, but those rules were put in when the Raiders won their lawsuit against the NFL, when the league tried to stop them from moving. And one of the big reasons they lost is because there were no guidelines or rules that would mandate what would determine whether a team should be allowed to move or not.
Well, we went through this, as a kid, as a 15-year-old kid, Howard, I was reading you right now at Sporting News and Pro Football Digest about, all of this stuff. And I'll tell you, we had lawsuits here, and I remember all the names of the lawyers and the governors from Chernoff and all these, people that eminent domain. I did a little work study at the library on eminent domain because as a 15-year-old kid, I wanted to write a term paper on that. So I don't know. I guess I've always been naturally drawn to this, but in St. Louis, it was even more crazy because the facility still hadn't been paid off the first time, right? Like that's the story behind all of this, is that your tax base brought the Rams there, and now you all have been left holding the bag to pay for the building, right?
Yeah, that's a part of it. And of course, the one thing that the Rams argued is because when the Rams moved, there was a controversial clause that was put in the lease that said the stadium had to be at 10-year intervals, a first-tier facility, which meant the top 25% of the entire NFL, which, of course, was, I guess, shrewd on the Rams' part to have that in there, and very naive from St. Louis people to allow that to go in there, because to think that you could have in a city that's certainly not a top 8 city in size or anything like that in the NFL, that you could have a stadium that would be in the top 25%. But they put it in there. They allowed that clause to get in there. And then Stan Kroenke, used that to be able to get out of the lease, because once you couldn't be a first-tier facility, and they asked for $700 million to upgrade the dome without any extension on the lease or any team contribution at all. And there's no city that could do that. Well, once the city said we can't do that, then the lease went year to year. And that is what allowed Stan Kroenke to get out of the final 10 years on the lease. But this is one of the first times ever that I can recall, Nestor, at least in the current environment, when, or even in the old environment, when the Raiders left, when the Colts left, when the Browns left, to go to Baltimore was the fact that those teams were trying to get new stadiums in the cities there were, and there wasn't any real effort. I don't know if there's no effort, but there wasn't a plan to get a new stadium. The difference here is that St. Louis responded to losing in the arbitration for the renovation of the Dome. They responded by coming up with a stadium plan without any good faith negotiation, without any involvement of the team at all, and came up with a plan that included $400 million of public money. And during that year, 2015, the league continued to say to the St. Louis group, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll follow the relocation rules. You get this stadium plan, and this team should stay here. And the owners said that as well. But at the end of the day, they had the plan, and so the real crux of it, Nestor, is that Roger Goodell, the commissioner, approved the Rams' application for relocation when any objective observer would say they did not fulfill the relocation rules. There was no good faith negotiating. It says plainly in the rules that you can't move just to be able to enrich the value of your franchise in another market. And there were lies told, and there was just a lot of deception. And so I think it's all that's all in the 52-page lawsuit. And I don't know if it has a chance or not. I mean, you never know how a judge is going to react. I don't know if it goes to a jury or whatever would happen, depending on how far it goes. But there was always a real sleazy feel to it and a lot of deception and lies that have got a lot of people upset. And that, in essence, is why this lawsuit was filed.
Howard, were you in St. Louis when the Cardinals left? I believe you were, right? I mean, you're originally from Philadelphia, and you worked out in that area because of Sporting News, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that is correct.
So you were there when they lost it the first time. You were there when they came and stole Georgia back. And, of course, Baltimore was involved with Georgia Frontier at that point, and as well as relocation and, the beer vendors that were out there in St. Louis that were trying to bring the team there, as well as Jacksonville and Wayne Weaver. And Memphis had a bid as well through FedEx at one point, and Bud Adams brought his team up. But, you've been through this thing. I wasn't, right? So, I mean, I was a kid in when the Mayflowers left. I remembered all the Herb Belgrad crab cake meetings, and I'm sure you covered many of those meetings as an interested St. Louis reporter for your own market. But then, things settle down. You get a team. We get a team. Cleveland winds up getting a team back. Houston gets a team back. Meanwhile, Jacksonville and Carolina sort of are what they are. I mean, even Tampa sort of deteriorated at one point as well. And Arizona gets their dome out there with your former team. I was shocked. This was the first owners' meetings I ever went to where there was a relocation. And I know last week Don Van Noda and Seth Wickersham wrote a huge piece about Mark Davison moving the team in Vegas and how he kind of finagled Adelson and kind of messed that thing up there, and there was a lot of hard feelings within everyone about the Chargers. But I found it fascinating that they could go into the room, come down the hallway, hold a press conference, and say we're going to play 2 more years in Oakland. Like I had never been through any of these press conferences with moved franchises. It kind of blew my mind. I mean, I felt my Baltimore thing come back to me from 30 years ago as to how easy it is to say you're going to do it. But then they actually have to go play these football games the next 2 years out in Oakland. I can't imagine this is going to be peaceful, Howard. You've been to Oakland. You know what goes on out there.
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting dynamic, obviously. I think if there is one market, and I shouldn't say market, I should probably say fan base, that could potentially live with this for a couple of years, it might be that Raider Nation and the Raiders fans, because I think also that they realize, and I think to a degree, I really believe that Mark Davis, all things being equal, would have liked to have stayed in Oakland. But let's remember, when they and the Chargers were recommended, by the way, by the committee almost a year and a half ago, to play in Carson, that there was no plan in Oakland. There was nothing, zero. And they've been trying to get something done there for more than a decade, and it hasn't happened. And then the ensuing year, of course, you have the Chargers exercising their option, and I don't know, maybe Oakland felt that we don't really have to try hard because there's nowhere for the Raiders to go. Who knows what the bottom line was? But they never really came up with a legitimate plan to keep the Raiders. And so I know there's people who believe that Davis really didn't do enough, but I think it got to the point where he felt, hey, they're not doing enough here. They never have. And who knows what would have happened if Vegas hadn't have been there as an opportunity. And if they hadn't approved the $750 million of public money for this stadium. This probably doesn't happen, and they're probably stuck there, and who knows what happens next. But they did get it done in Las Vegas, and like I said, back to your original point, obviously there's going to be fans who are disgusted by it all, but there's going to be others say, hey, this is the Raiders. I mean, because I've been told for more than a year, Nestor, at least 6 to 8 months, that there's Raiders fans had already been investigating condos and different places in Las Vegas to rent or to even, have as a, quote, vacation home to be able to go there for the game.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all like Vegas for a weekend. I mean, I think that will work. I mean, I tell you what, I think long term, maybe the Rams can work in L.A. The Chargers thing's a joke to me. Like what the hell are they doing? Allowing that, fronting that, and I know, inside of the circles there, a lot of this is about divvying up those relocation fees, right? Like that money just sort of like gets crapped out, right? Like everybody's, drinking in on $30 million, all of these franchise owners, just for allowing these teams to move into markets where they may or may not do better.
I really have a question about the Chargers. I'm with you on that. I think, once again, Dean Spanos got to the end of his rope in terms of just the way things were coming down in San Diego. At least they got to a point of even having a vote on a stadium in November, which they hadn't had in the last 10 to 15 years while they were trying to get a new stadium. They never got support from the politicians or anyone there. And we also know how difficult it is in California to get public money for stadium. It just doesn't happen. And in San Francisco, there was virtually no public money.
Well, then the question should be, should it happen? And the answer is probably no. And I'll be honest with you, Howard, I've been wrestling with this in Baltimore, where our taxpayers got together to save the Orioles and build Camden Yards. And, 25 years later, Peter Angelo's the only one that's made any money off of that. The city hasn't, tremendously benefited other than it gets warm fuzzies when they make the playoffs once in a while. But, from an economic standpoint, you'd be very hard-pressed to fudge together numbers to tell me that we didn't build a stadium so that he could go cash it in for $3 billion. And for 25 years, the franchise has kind of languished away and been a little toy for him to use as a political tool,
I don't debate that, and that's a legitimate debate whether communities should do that. But the bottom line is they can't get it done in San Francisco, in California, and let's be honest, would L.A. even have a team yet if it wasn't for Stan Kroenke and his billions of dollars? But most of those, even though it's not, quote, public money in terms of taxpayers, what they were able to do in California, in San Francisco, and what they'll probably be able to do in L.A. is raise an incredible amount of money for PSLs, which is, quote, it's from fans, so it is, quote, private because it's not taxpayer money, but that's money that there's more money to be able to do that in in California, and at least in San Francisco and L.A., than there is in other places, and certainly more than they can do in San Diego.
Well, as a guy that had to, 20 years ago, I forked over my PSL. I'm a member of the country club. You know what I mean? That's how bad I wanted football in Baltimore in 1995. Right?
Right, and I think in San Diego, just the market itself doesn't support the level of PSLs. In San Francisco, I don't know the exact number, but I know it was well north of $500 million in PSL money that they raised for that stadium. And Stan Kroenke, I know this, Nestor, they are expecting to raise upwards of $800 million on PSLs. So even though this is said, Stan Kroenke is building this stadium with his own money, a good amount of it is, but a lot of it is going to be on those PSLs, and they might get more than $800 million because there's going to be some structure where the Chargers will be able to sell PSLs also, and that will go toward the construction of the stadium. So that will help Kroenke. So California's a unique situation, but they wouldn't have a team in LA if it wasn't for that. And the Carson project was because there were two teams involved, and that they could make it work financially without that public money. So that's been the problem there, and so I think that was what it was for Dean Spanos. Is you had a situation where they couldn't get a stadium done, and so okay, I'll just join. And he didn't want to join Stan Kroenke. That was the last thing in the world that he wanted to do. But I don't think he felt that he didn't have a choice.
He is Howard Balzer. He is all things NFL, of course, at SiriusXM, and for many, many years covering the National Football League. He's at hbalzer721 out on Twitter, and you can follow him as we get up on the schedule coming out this week. And Howard, we're playing in London this year, Nashville, Green Bay. We actually play in Oakland this year, and I'm not sure whether my road trip's going to be to Vegas or to Oakland, so I'm trying to figure that out as well. But can I just ask you, that it's been a little while since we really talked, and I know even privately we haven't talked. How was the season for you and for people that who loved football and loved the Rams? They say breaking up's hard to do. I remember that first season here and how weird it was, but it's been a long time ago. Run me through it for you, because you were so vested in this, and I can't imagine how angry you must be personally, and clearly they lied. They just did. That much is clear. How you doing, man? How's St. Louis doing?
Well, it was obviously a very strange season. I certainly was able to keep busy enough with all the national things I do. It did affect me locally with the radio I do locally, and it just felt strange, not being able to go out to practice, and not going to games and all those things. And for fans, it was the same way. And a lot of the sponsors that I had on my radio, like one of my major sponsors, was a guy that was just so disgusted by it. He stayed with me because he likes me, but he just wasn't into it. Because he would come on with me and we'd do some segments and pick some games, and he just wasn't into it. He just got more into college football than the NFL, and he said maybe it'll be a little different this year, I don't know, but he was just not into it as much. Certain fans still watch, and let me say this, there was a lot of hate watching of the Rams in St. Louis, and there was a lot of glee in the fact that they did terribly and winning only 4 games. In fact, Nestor, there was a game, it was in November sometime, where the Rams were playing New England, and they didn't televise all the Rams games in St. Louis, but they televised a decent number of them, and that game happened to be on, and the Patriots were just hammering the Rams, and it was something like 28-0 at the end of the third quarter. And the network, the station, they switched to another game, and the switchboard at the local affiliate, it was a CBS game because the game was in LA, and so the game was on CBS, not like most of them on Fox. So the local CBS affiliate, the switchboards lit up with fans calling up complaining that they took the game off because they were so enjoying seeing the Rams get hammered.
Well, it was hard for me to hate on John Fossil once he took over for a week and a half or whatever it was at the end, right?
Well, yeah, it wasn't personal against the players or the coaches, although there was a little bit against Jeff Fisher because there was always a lot of mixed opinion on him. But it was more towards the owner and Kevin Demoff, who ran the team and was basically Kroenke's puppet. And when Demoff, would talk, you knew that Kroenke's lips were moving with the lies that were told. It was more against the organization than against any of the players or anything like that. But there was a lot of hate watching. But people still watch. I'll tell you, the TV. The interesting thing was that the TV ratings for whether it was a Rams game or whether it was a regular, just a different NFL game, were the same as the ratings in LA for Rams games. They did not have everyone talked about.
Well, I don't know that everybody was planning their Sunday around the Rams in Los Angeles, right? There's 10 million people there, and
yeah. That was it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Broncos fans and Steelers fans and Cowboys fans, and that's sort of the way the league wanted it for a quarter of a century, right?
Well, yeah, and so the ratings were actually down in LA from what they had been when they were just pumping in the best games in the city, getting 3 games every weekend. And that's an interesting thing moving forward, Nestor, because a lot of people don't realize how the rules are. Or maybe you realize it there, of course, when you've got when your team is away. Let's say when the Ravens are away, you can get 3 games in the afternoon. When they're home, you usually only get 2. Well, and that was the way it was in L.A., and they're putting on the Rams game. Well, now with the Chargers being there, they're going to have very, very limited windows of being able to get the other good games in the league on in L.A., and so some of the ratings were suffering. And so it was a very interesting dynamic. I know St. Louis ranked, I believe it was either 11th or 12th in the entire country with the Super Bowl rating. So obviously there's a lot of football fans in this town, as there is in a lot of towns. But the football fan still enjoyed the game, but the regular games, certainly none of them got the level of rating that the Rams would get. In fact, I'll just say this number: the Rams averaged about a 16 rating on TV locally throughout their entire time in St. Louis. In L.A., they were getting 6s or 7s. That was the best they did for Rams games on TV. And here, without the Rams, they were getting St. Louis was getting 6s or 7s for mostly all the games. They never got 16s as they did for the Rams when it was their team, but they were still getting very representative ratings for those afternoon windows on Sunday.
Howard, before I let you go, first off, we all know the Browns are going to screw up this number 1 pick, and we can talk some football later after the draft, but I want to give you a little platform to talk about Dan Rooney, who's a guy that I had met once or twice through my journey, but I was always a little intimidated by him, and he probably would have hated that, but he was the only owner I ever saw, other than Abe Pollin, who literally would sit in the media room and dine with the media and the scouts and the executives, and literally, before every Steeler game I ever saw at Three Rivers, at Heinz Field. I remember the first time I saw him at Three Rivers, I'm like, damn, that looks like that is Dan Rooney. What the hell is he doing in the media room here? He's just hanging out and watching football and talking with everybody. That's who he was, and as much as I hate the Steelers, it was tough to hate on Dan Rooney, man.
You're 100% right. He was a man of the people, a man of Pittsburgh. He lived in a house a stone's throw from Three Rivers and Heinz Field, and never moved from that house throughout his entire life. He was in a world that has gone so mad, and I understand all the business aspects of it. But in an NFL that is everything is about the almighty dollar, and we know it's important. There's no doubt about it. But Dan Rooney still tried to fight that as much as he could. And by the way, his son Art was on that committee that voted not to have the Rams move because they had the stadium, and he was just different. It was just the way he was. You look at that organization. Now, granted, they didn't have a whole lot of success from the time they were founded until Chuck Noll came there in 1969. But since then, with Dan running it, pretty much it was unparalleled success. They're on their only 3 head coaches since 1969, which is somewhat insane.
That really is incredible.
Contemplate.
Chew on that a little while,
is.
Right? Yeah, I mean, really.
But, when I heard that he passed the other day, I couldn't help remembering, and I have it in front of me because I looked it up before the interview, this quote that is hanging in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And it's something that everyone should probably sit back and ponder about ownership and about, everyone always says in sports, well, it's a business. Well, it's a business. And yes, it is a business. But I've always believed, and there are those who believe, that it's a unique business. There's not too many other businesses than professional sports that put the city name on the business. So to me, that goes beyond just being a restaurant that competes with hundreds of other restaurants or a store, whatever it is. When you have a major league team or an NFL team in your city, there's not another one. They're the only one. To me, that makes it somewhat different, and that you'd like to see a little more sportsmen than businessmen in terms of the way they run their teams. And here's the quote that is hanging in the Pro Football Hall of Fame that his dad, Art Rooney, said. He said, "I don't like losing games, and I don't like losing money. But I'll tell you from the bottom of my heart, whatever I lost in money, I was lucky to be able to lose it. I'd pay to lose it to keep in this game. I love it that much." And I think Dan Rooney obviously embodies that. And when you look at some of these other owners, maybe Stan Kroenke near the top of the list, you really wonder how much do they really love the game, or does he just love the money that's associated with the game?
Howard Balzer's out in St. Louis. He's still covering the National. They're not going anywhere, right, Howard? I mean, you're all in for this NFL thing no matter what happens, right?
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it.
Hey, man, stay safe out there. We'll maybe stop by for a ball game before. Hey, how about the St. Louis Blues, right? I mean, maybe the Caps will come back and do this thing here while I'm in Toronto, and maybe I'll be in St. Louis in a couple of weeks. I have a feeling Ted Drew's frozen desserts will be involved. I still owe you some sort of Polynesian concrete treat at some point.
Yeah, the Blues have been – it was an amazing story because quickly when Ken Hitchcock was fired, and then they traded Kevin Shattenkirk, there was a couple of columnists for the Post-Dispatch basically wrote that the season was over, the Blues have tanked it, they have no chance to do anything, and they then got it all together and finished in third in the division, ended up with 99 points, and are on the verge of closing out Minnesota in the first round, and, who knows? You just never know once you get into the playoffs, and no matter what you did during the regular season, it's there for anybody who can play the best hockey, and they're getting unbelievable goaltending from a guy named Jake Allen, and we all know if you have that hot goalie in the postseason, a lot of good things can happen.
See, you still got a good hockey team, so you got something to latch on to here, and we'll straighten the Cardinals out before it's all over with as well. Always great to visit with you, Howard. Thanks for the time as always, man. Hang in there.
My pleasure, Nestor. Always enjoy it.
Still love that town, St. Louis, as Bruce Springsteen screamed from the stage last year as I went out to St. Louis. I always have fun out there. If you want a great baseball experience, that's one of them for sure. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life and making it happen there for sure. Let's see. I'm out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We're waiting on the NFL schedule. We have London on sale. We got $100 off for that if you send me an email. And we're waiting on Green Bay, Nashville, Minnesota, and wherever the heck the Raiders are playing. But our trips are going to go on sale later on in the week. I'm in Toronto chasing the Caps and the Maple Leafs all week long. I love Canada. You give them $1, they give you $1.40. It's a good deal. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.